Today we have a really fun guest that'll be with us. It's Coach Matt Ohnemus of Central Dewitt Sabres. Just a little briefing on Matt. He's a homegrown product out of Dewitt. Graduated from Dewitt, went on to college, came back into our program back in 2009 as an assistant wrestling coach, and then took over the reins as a head wrestling coach in 2016 of Dewitt. Coach Matt, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me, guys. Like I said a little bit before the show, but I appreciate what you're doing and really delighted to be a part of it here today. So thanks.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Thank you for coming. First things first, everyone's, facing it right now. We've got coronavirus, COVID-19 going on. How are you staying busy these days?
Well, I'm in a somewhat unique position. Being in education, obviously, I'm at home. And my wife is a nurse practitioner here in DeWitt and obviously in healthcare. So that keeps her busy. And I am a Mr. Mom. I'm a stay-at-home mom with our 3 kids. They are 6, 3, and 4 months. So keeps me extremely busy. But as I was having a meeting, Zoom get-together with some friends recently, and I said, it's kind of cool. My youngest daughter now, we have all this time together I never had with my other 2 kids. So I think everybody's kind of trying to find the positives in a really, really tough situation. So for me, it's a chance to be at home with my kids and really focused on getting to spend some quality time with them.
Hey, Coach, so let's take it from the beginning. How did you get your start into wrestling?
So I started late, especially by, I think, current standards. I didn't get started till 7th grade. Both of my brothers were involved in Sabretooth, which was our youth organization. And my uncle Doyle Fox actually was the president. And he and Rex King had really elevated that to a point where a lot of kids were getting involved. And so I was around the sport, but it wasn't something that I really had gotten involved in. And coincidentally, my neighbor across the street was a fellow named Josh Watts. And Josh and Ben and I and my 2 brothers, and then those 2 guys, we ran around the neighborhood. We did everything together. And Terry was, of course, he and Jeff Sinclair were running Sabretooth at the time and really getting things up and going and creating some pretty successful wrestlers. So it's a funny story. I can distinctly remember it like it was yesterday. We were out on our back deck, and it was the summer before 7th grade when you can start participating in middle school wrestling at Central DeWitt. And Josh said, "Hey, you should give wrestling a try." I'm like, I don't know. He's like, "No, you should do it." And it was literally, that was it. I went to my mom and I said, "I'm going to give this wrestling thing a try." Now, the funny thing is, talking to my mom now, she still jokes, I was a skinny, scrawny. All I did was hang out with friends, video games, and trombone. I was the least likely candidate to get involved in wrestling and even potentially have success at it. And when I go recruit our middle schoolers now, I have a picture of me in 7th grade in my singlet, and I look like the dorkiest, dweebiest thing. And I put that up on the overhead of my presentation. I say, "Listen, guys, if this guy can go out for wrestling and have any sort of success, I'm telling you what, any one of you guys in the stands can." So, so Josh, who ended up, of course, you guys did a great job having a program with him, but ended up going and having a very successful career at Assumption, winning as wrestler. So that's how I wound up getting involved in the sport. And who would have thought in 1995 it would catapult me to kind of finding who I am today.
Yeah, that's a great story. We're big. I'm a big Josh Watts fan, of course, and shout out to the Iowa Western Reavers for sure too. Very cool. Who were some of the wrestlers that were your role models or maybe influenced your wrestling style growing up?
Getting into it late, I didn't have a lot of people in terms of kind of going to the Hawks. I remember we would take bus trips. I remember the Hawks wrestling Arizona State distinctly. The Sabretooth and the high school program, we got some buses, went out to Iowa City. And I remember getting Joe Williams' autograph, but those kinds of experiences didn't inform me because I don't think I knew enough about the sport at that point in time. And so honestly, it was those people who really informed me as a wrestler, those coaches that were close to me. Terry Watts, going over to Josh's and working out he had this room in his basement that I bet was, 8 foot by 8 foot. I mean, it was tiny. And just rolling around there. And then Josh's younger brother, Ben, went on to have success at Dewitt as a wrestler, 2-time placer himself. So those guys really informed me. Another one, Justin Sinclair, his dad, Jeff, I guess one of the ways that I really decided to get into the sport was the truth of the matter is Josh and Justin needed workout partners. And my dear friend, even to this day, who just got inducted in our Hall of Fame, is Justin Peterson, winningest wrestler at our program. He was around Josh's weight. I was around Justin's weight. And we would go and have these workouts. Josh would drill and work out with Pete, Justin Peterson, Pete, and I would be Justin Sinclair's partner, who would end up being my partner throughout high school then. And they were just these additional practices. And we weren't exactly warm bodies, but we were kids that were kind of into what we were doing, but green. And we were willing and available. And I think they took advantage of that. And we took advantage of the opportunity. And those moments, I think, really informed me as much as anything.
So you go through your high school career, had a successful high school career, and then you go on to college, Matt. Now, you didn't wrestle collegiately, but you do have an interesting story about your roommates, and how did you ever end up in that situation?
Yeah, a lot of just happenstance, really. So I wound up, I graduated from Iowa, but my first 2 years were at Northern Iowa. And these kids have no idea, but back in the day, you guys know, you get a call or you get a letter and you get this name and this phone number. And the guy on my sheet was a fellow named Matt Markowski from Florida. Knew nothing about him. I gave him a ring and we talked a little bit. And I come to find out he was a 3-time state champ in Florida, took third, first, and he was going to wrestle at UNI. Pretty cool, being that I was passionate about wrestling. I had thought about Loris and Randy Stewart, but who's a really influential guy to me and has had a positive impact on me, but decided, you know what, I'm gonna focus on academics and leave the athletics behind at this point. So to wind up with that roommate was pretty wild. So Matt and I were roommates, and a floor above us, we got to know a guy named Chad Davis, who was a 2-time state champ, 2-time runner-up from Council Bluffs. And Chad, Matt, and I would run around, and across the hall from Chad, total coincidence, was Josh Watts. And so Josh, who was my friend from DeWitt, even though he had gone to Assumption, we still were good pals. And Chad and Matt and I wound up hanging out all the time. So after our freshman year, we decided to get an apartment together. And in my second year, I lived with Chad Davis, Matt Markowski, and Josh Watts. And after that, I ended up going to Iowa to follow my girlfriend at the time, now my wife. But I still joke that in our household, we had 2, 5, 8 state championships. And I was none of them. But you know what? We had all those state championships in our apartment. So I was around the sport even in college. And it was neat to kind of get that lens through which a D1 guy competes. You know, I was obviously on the sidelines, but it was interesting to see what that looked like and what that took, and certainly shaped me in certain aspects as well.
Yeah, that's a really cool situation. In the first week we were recording these podcasts, we had Eric Juergens, Dan Knight, and Josh Watts on, and Jay made a joke, and he was right. He's like, it was while we were talking to Josh, he said, "Hey Josh, between me and you and Rob and then Eric and Dan, we have 11 state titles, you know." Of course, me and Jay have none, but
yeah.
It's good to be around, successful people. You try to learn from those guys for sure.
Yeah, and I think, and man, who knows? You change one thing, but being around the sport in college, I think it whetted my appetite and it kept me in tune with wrestling. Maybe I'm not. Not that we didn't enjoy college, and I enjoyed the college scene and had success in the classroom and outside, but I was so embedded in wrestling after those 2 years that it kept me in tune with the sport. And I think, I've never really reflected on it this way, but looking back, perhaps that was something that kept it in my veins and allowed me to pursue what I ultimately would down the road.
Sure. Hey, I've got a follow-up question on that. One of your assistant coaches, Greg Green, he went to UNI as well. Did you guys meet at UNI, or did you know him before that?
So Greg's a year behind me, and our other assistant, my dear friend Andy Cruz, we all were in school around the same time. Cruz was 2 years ahead of me. Greg was a year behind me. And at the time, Millennium Freestyle Club was headquartered in, we would work out in DeWitt, and at Mount St. Clair and a couple other schools. We'd travel around. So I got to know them through that. And actually, Greg and I did wrestle each other at Luther Camp the summer before my senior year. So it's been the summer of 2000, and Greg was a rising junior. I was a rising senior. And we still laugh about it. I had a pretty good body lock, and I was pretty lanky, so guys didn't often see it coming. And I was wrestling Greg, and I hooked up a pretty solid body lock. One arm was trapped, far side duck to a trap body lock. And I didn't know at the time, and Greg had this move where he would go double overs, and he did it at practice all the time. He'd fall to his back, and his shin would clock you right between the legs. And where that shin landed is where it landed. I can tell you where it landed on me. And he hit me, and he took me to my back, and he picked up 2 and 2. I ended up fighting back, and I ended up beating him by 1. We had a rematch. He beat me by 1. But to this day, we joke about him being all ready for that body lock. I thought he hit him dead to rights, and he sent me for a little bit of my own ride. So
nice. So that actually leads in, throws and stuff like that into my next question. We're big, obviously we're missing on freestyle and Greco at this point. However, what's like your normal feel and philosophy on off-season wrestling?
That's a great question. Obviously, I think kids need to be on the mat to some extent in order to maintain just a level of where they are, right? And coming from Dewitt, where we have, we're going to be one of the smallest schools in the MAC, aside from Assumption, which is in a different spot, obviously being parochial. We're the smallest school in the MAC. And I'm excited about being in the MAC. I think it's a good fit. But the reality for us is that we share athletes maybe more than some other schools do. And I'll take an example. A couple of years ago, we had a fellow that finished 4th for us, Nick Smith, at 195, and he was a heck of a football player. I mean, a tremendous football player. And so it was incumbent upon me to respect the notion that he needed to be developing for football and for wrestling. And the question was, what does he need to be doing to be at his best in both of those things? And part of that for me was, I need you on the mat to some extent. I don't want you to get too rusty. But are you going to go compete at freestyle tournaments? Yeah, probably not. And I appreciate that. You're in track. You're a 4-sport athlete. Other guys who are focused on wrestling, we need to be making those tournaments, because if you're committing your time and energy and all of your athleticism to that endeavor, then that needs to be your focus. So I want everybody wrestling. I think we as coaches, it's up to us to determine what's best for each guy and how do we get them at what their peak looks like. And, that's coaching, right? That's the challenge and the fun of coaching.
Coach, next question I had with you is, you touched a little bit on how you got your start in wrestling and great partners coming up through wrestling with Sabertooth Club and everything. But how's the sport of wrestling evolved or changed since you began versus the kids coming up into your program now?
Coach Grell and I talk about this quite a bit. And when we were in school, 2A around us, you had Columbus Junction and Wilton, and you had just unbelievable Maquoketa or Hammers. You had all these really incredible programs. Not that it just looked different. It was kind of a different subset of schools that were really, really tough. And they were brawlers and they were bruisers. And the technique now is at such a high level. I know I've seen some of your posts with the state championship matches, I think that the Pin Doctors put out there. And even when you look 20 years ago, the level of, for one, scrambling and the ways that guys can, it used to be if you were on deep on a high C, you were going to get a takedown more often than not. Now, I mean, as you fellas know, that's a third of the battle. The next part is how do you finish that thing? And to me, those nuances are such a higher level than what they were. The scrambling and the finishes and just the funk that you see that guys do that really was not near that caliber in, say, 2000. I think another thing to that same point is access to really good coaching, both locally and even, man, you got a Flow subscription, you go on YouTube and you can find you can find John Smith breaking down his low single. And I remember I had to borrow a tape. It was like Bobby Douglas from 1984 VHS, because that was the only leg riding tape we had. And I really wanted to learn that technique. So that's what I use. And so, I would say the scrambling and the funk, in addition to just guys are so much more prepared for the high school game that I think we were coming out. Into that same token, I think, guys, you look at college, when you have a Yanni Diakomahalis that can win as a, true freshman right away. I think just kids are so prepared so early now.
Sure. I know I've heard about the Bobby Douglas tapes and stuff like that. And at that point, that was like revolutionary. I think before that, I can't remember who I heard talking about it, but they talked about like posters. Like they learned how to do certain moves by looking at, a poster. It's like, oh my Lord.
Or local camps. I remember the first leg riding camp I went to was Bam Pastelnik put one on at Clinton when he was buddies with Dan Knight, and he was coaching at UT, I think, at the time. And, if you wanted to learn, you had to go to camps. I would go to Coach T's Toss and Turnham camp, and that was your access. There was no library of information like there is now.
Sure.
Now there's so much. For me as a coach, sometimes it's tough to cull through it all, and then there's so much information. It's like we've gone completely the other way.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. Who would you say maybe was the most influential coach that you had, and why?
Absolutely Kurt Kreider, our now retired AD with the school year being done. But Coach was a person that had high expectations for you as an athlete, but higher as a person. And he really informed me into the person that I'd become. I mean, truly. And the simple fact that I went from his athlete to an assistant coach at football at the time, and then almost a collegial relationship. Our relationship is involved in so many powerful ways, and I still lean on him, and I'm sure I will for the rest of my life. And outside of my own dad, I would say Coach Kreider has had the biggest impact on shaping me as a man, as a coach, and even as a father, perhaps.
I like that answer, Matt. Which kind of leads into our next question as well. It's a little longer question here, but if you do your job successfully as a coach and an instructor, teacher through our school system, what's your final product look like, or what do you want to see out of our wrestlers when they graduate and they go back into the real world, or continue on the collegiate path?
Yeah. We kind of have a 4-pronged approach, or at least I guess I do philosophically. Student, wrestler, citizen, team. And in my mind, if I focus on those 4 things, theoretically, and if kids commit to those 4 aspects, I feel like they're going to be prepared for life, prepared just as I was to be a dad, a husband, a professional. And you can't have one without the other. And what kind of informed me on that philosophy was Nick Mitchell of Grandview. I saw him speak, and he talked about, of course, they talk a lot about their championship lifestyle, which is a powerful thing. But what he said was, you can't be good in 6 aspects of your life, be lousy in a 7th, and expect that you're going to be able to continue to achieve at a really high level. And that was powerful to me. And in my own mind, as I was deciding, what does it mean to be a head coach? What do I want this program? How do I shape my vision for Central DeWitt Wrestling? I really kind of honed in on those 4 things: student, wrestler, citizen, team. And I think if we have kids that are competent in all those, and why I like that is it's easy, I think, a lot of times to say, well, I want good people. Well, of course I want good people, but I want to win wrestling too, right? And I don't want to be so focused on, and I think we do have good kids, and that's far more important than making them successful wrestlers. I do believe that. I also believe we sacrifice and work too hard as coaches, as athletes, to not want to win. And if I would say the one thing, it's resiliency. If every kid gets out of wrestling a resiliency that they would not have had otherwise, they're going to bounce back from everything in life. And as we get older and life happens, more challenges, COVID, And I think resiliency is the single most important characteristic that we can kind of put into these boys to allow them to be their best versions of themselves down the road. So that's a little bit long-winded answer, but I'm pretty passionate about that. I think it's a really important thing that we as coaches have to constantly be thinking about why are we doing it?
Yeah. And with that answer, Coach, it's a common answer we're seeing from every aspect. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Rob. I mean, college coaches are saying the same thing as club coaches, as high school coaches. I think we had the same direction coming from Coach Danny Knight as well. So and that's good to see that our programs are doing more than just throwing out a wrestler out of the
and I think too, just to add briefly, is they're not mutually exclusive. I feel like sometimes we have this devil's bargain we have to make of great wrestlers are great people. Our goal is I want everything. I want it all. Yeah,
that's a really good point. And excuse me, sorry, Jay, you hit it, and I agree. I think Eric Juergens was one of the first people who I remember while we were doing these podcasts say, you can't be a great wrestler and not necessarily good at anything else. And he said it better than I did, but I mean, really, it's you win. You're not going to really succeed at wrestling and be a terrible student, or be a great wrestler who totally ignores his diet. It all works together.
That's right.
You need to win, and it's not just winning at wrestling. It's really winning at everything. You need to do the best you can in all facets.
Yeah.
That message.
Yeah, we talk about, and I have it on our Twitter. I really believe in it. It's preparation for life. There's nothing better. And you guys, I'm preaching to the choir here, but in terms of what wrestling does for individual, look at me, look at us, the things that we're pursuing in life, the resiliency we have, wrestling prepared us. It's the single greatest preparation for life in my mind.
Yeah, totally agree. What would you say was the biggest obstacle you have had to overcome as either a wrestler or a coach?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I would say for me, it's in coaching and learning that what worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone. And there was certain I was a guy who really liked to get on top, and I wasn't always super effective on my feet, but I like to say I was efficient, right? I found ways to get on my into my top game. And when I came in as a young coach, I thought, man, I was a seventh grader. I figured it out. I mean, if I could do it, anyone can do it. And what I learned quickly was there's a lot of pieces at play. And it's a matter of coaching is me figuring out what works best for a kid and kind of what they latch onto. You're going to find a passion. They're going to find an identity in certain parts of their game. But what my identity was, I can't just imbue that in them. Now, I've had kids that did. We had Ira Kuhn, who's up at Lutheran, having a really nice D3 career. He was able to do some of the things that worked well for me. That was great. That was fun to coach. It was neat to be in his corner. But when you have other guys that, Nick Smith was an explosive athletic kid, he wasn't going to do the things I did. And it was up to me to coach him up in the ways that I can make him best. So that was a steep learning curve for me as a young coach, I think.
All right, Coach, tell us a little bit about this past season and what you're looking for next season. I mean, big changes. You already mentioned going into the MAC.
Yeah, that's first and foremost, is we're going to be joining a new conference, which is really exciting for a lot of reasons. The MAC is a high-caliber conference. 3A competition, I think, is going to make us really, really well prepared for our postseason. I think we will see some of the best wrestling in the state. There's not a doubt in my mind. And, by that same token, we're coming from the WAMAC, which is, for my money, as tough a 2A conference as there is when you have the Solons and the West Delaware. So I think we're equipped to go in and compete in the MAC, but I think we still have we'll still have our spots where we're going to learn and we're going to have to grow, and there's going to be some tough nights, but I think we're going to come through that a better wrestling program and a better athletics program for making that move. Not going to South Tama on a Tuesday night also, that drive that's going to be, or Manchester. So those are going to be better for our students as well. In terms of this season, we thought in coaching and in life and in sports, you think you got it figured out and you don't. And we wound up putting out a team that didn't look like the team we thought we were going to put out in the summer. We're missing some guys, and it looked a lot different. And that's okay, but because of that, we had to put some young guys in there. We had some inexperience. We hadn't had holes in our lineup for a number of years, and unfortunately, we had a couple places where it wasn't in the best interest of our young green kids to put them out there. So forfeiting a little more than I was enjoying. And we didn't come home with a winning record, but our team really grew, and we had some great wins. We beat Mount Vernon in a really dynamic duel at home, who's a team that is always tough. And we beat rival Macokota a couple times and had some nice wins along the way. What I loved was our kids grew. The team that was wrestling in the first duel was nowhere near the caliber of the team at the end. And our kids were showing that they're coachable. And that has me excited because we only lose 2 seniors, neither of which could compete a whole lot for us. So we bring back pretty much everybody next year with some experience under their belt. Now, this COVID thing might shape a little bit. Everybody's dealing with that. So it's too bad because we were on such a neat run with those guys. I was excited to get them into off season, but that is what it is. And then, of course, our postseason, we had two state qualifiers. Cole Miller at heavyweight, a kid that came out in 8th grade, 6'4", 270, great football player, figuring it out. Didn't get on the award stand, but as a junior kind of knows what it looks like, and we're excited for him to be out there. And then, of course, Keaton Zimet, third-time placing, took third, was 1 point away from being in the finals, and he's a guy that has everything he needs to be a state champion. I know that's what he wants, and that's what he's training for, and we're going to prepare him for. So in addition to those 2 guys, we have a whole host of young guys that'll be sophomores and juniors that I think can come in, if not surprise people, find a way out to the tournament. So, we took some lumps last year, but we're really excited about the MAC and kind of what this lineup projects, and hopefully we can make a really nice run throughout the course of the season.
Sure. I know I was excited. Obviously, we knew, the announcement was maybe a little over a year ago that you guys were joining the MAC. And when I was at one of my daughter's chorus concert at Bettendorf High School, and I look up and I saw the banner. It was Bettendorf, and then it's in alphabetical order. So Bettendorf and Central DeWitt. And I snapped a picture and sent it to Jay. I'm like, it looks pretty nice up there. So.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really good fit. There'll be learning curves for everybody. I think even the existing conference, but within a year or 2, I really believe it'll be clockwork, and it'll be a really nice fit.
Yeah, I totally agree. So with this shutdown period we're all experiencing right now, everything's closed, no gyms. I mean, it's a bummer, but we're all in it. What are you instructing wrestlers to do right now to continue to get better?
Stay busy, stay active. And I think if you're on Twitter and you see these guys, I was just seeing Reese Humphrey was filling up water jugs and doing curls with water jugs and giving. We're all dealing with this, and it's that resiliency. It's a little bit of resourcefulness. We're equipping the kids with workouts, but they've got tools at their disposal. And I think what we're going to find out is how motivated kids are, because everyone is suffering the same kind of setback, so to speak. On the other hand, this is a chance to make gains, right? There's guys that may be ahead of you that aren't taking those advantages. What are you doing right now to jump over top of them? What are you doing to leapfrog some of those guys that maybe come February, you did the things now that are going to put you in a position? So as a coach, it's really hard. I like to be able to, I'm a relationship guy. I like to see my athletes. I like to talk to them. Also, I like to check in. I like to try and make sure that, they're doing their part to be their best versions of themselves. We had a Zoom meeting, but it's just not the same, right? And so, those are all the challenges we're just trying to tackle one day at a time and impress upon them. You gotta get out of bed and get after it if you want it to happen, because nobody else can make you right now.
All right, Coach, we've hit that time where we call OT sudden death. This is where it's crunch time. We're going to be throwing questions at you quick and hard, all right?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, favorite wrestling movie?
It's got to be Vision Quest. I mean, yeah, no doubt about it.
Favorite superhero?
Well, that's a timely question at our house. We do a lot of Avengers. And when my son is Hulk, I'm always Captain America. So I guess that makes me Captain America.
All right. This question was put up to me just for the record, okay? Have you ever wrestled anyone on your coaching staff? You mentioned someone already.
Yeah, I wrestled Greg Green, and we split at a summer camp. And Andy Cruz, who was a senior, ranked, probably 4th in the state, tech falled a very not very tough freshman Matt Ohnemus in the second period at the Lancer duels. So, yeah, both those guys.
What is your favorite wrestling match of all time?
I love Perry versus Hendricks. That was an unbelievable match. And Mark Perry's one of my favorite guys to watch. In person, I saw Chris Hendrick versus Jay Borschel in the semifinals of the 2010 Nationals. So I can't pick between those two because I just love both those matches.
All right. Greatest U.S. Olympic wrestler.
I got to say John Smith until somebody does something otherwise. 6 world, 2 Olympic. I think he right now is the creme de la creme until somebody unseats him.
So what's your favorite food? And then if you want, maybe plug a local restaurant in your area.
Oh, yeah. Well, when you're talking DeWitt, you have to get a hold of a grilled tenderloin at Murphy's Pub here in town. And they have a tremendous selection of craft brews, all the toppling to go with it. So, Connor Murphy at Murphy's Pub takes good care of me, and it's well worth the trip if you want to get to DeWitt.
Very good. All right. Very good.
Favorite wrestling style?
Efficient, right? I love tough top game. I love guys that can put boots in, and I think that's an exciting brand of wrestling. And I always think of Gene Mills. He said, you can't beat everybody, but you can pin anybody. So.
How about what's your favorite football team?
Well, I got to say the Hawks was a season ticket holder for 10 years. And went to a number of bowl games. So in terms of just watching football, love my Hawkeyes.
All right. Got a lot of time to think about this one during this down period, but favorite vacation destination?
My wife and I took a trip to Boston, and as a history teacher, we had a great time. But truthfully, right now, at the point in my life I am, any hotel where I can take my kids and we go swimming and just bounce on the beds and throw around, I would take pretty much any. I'd go to Davenport right about now if I could just get that. That would be pretty special.
All right, Coach, our last question. What is your favorite quote?
Probably my favorite quote is from Mark Perry. He said it on his Flow Wrestling special, but he said, if you want to be great, you have got to go to dark places. And that speaks to me, right? Like, you've got to do some things. You've got to go to some places physically and mentally that you're not willing to go to get to the places you want to get. And I use that quote a lot with our guys. Like, what do you do? What dark places are you willing to go that other guys aren't to get the things that they aren't willing to go get? So, yeah.
Love it. All right. Well, Coach, thank you for your time, and good luck this upcoming season. All right.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. And thanks for what you're doing for wrestling in the area. The people deserve it. And if there's anything I can do along the way, I hope you'll reach out and let me be a part of it. So thank you.
You bet. Yep. Thank you, Coach. Appreciate it. All right. Thank you for tuning in. Please share this podcast with your friends. Give us a like and a follow on Facebook and Twitter at QCA Wrestle. And keep an eye out for more QCA wrestling content coming soon.